Hi, and welcome to Module 6 of this pluralsight course named Practical HTML5. My name is Gilles Cleren and you can follow me on Twitter via @GillesCleren. In the previous module, we've done a lot of JavaScript to use some of the new APIs included with HTML5. In this sixth module, we are going to explore some more novelties in the platform. And yes, for a large part of the functionality, we'll again be using JavaScript. This chapter focuses on two of the more visual aspects of HTML5, namely playing audio and video, as well as using the canvas. The agenda for this module does indeed confirm what I've just said. We're going to kick off the module by looking at how we can include in our site some audio and video. This is now with HTML5 built into the platform. And of course, this makes the life of the developer again a lot easier. In the second part of this module, we are going to check out one of the most popular topics that comes with HTML5, the canvas. As mentioned, we'll be writing mostly JavaScript to work with that canvas. So after this module, where is our site going to end up? We are going to add some video files into our site, and we're going to do that so that users with all kinds of browsers will be able to play back that video. We'll also be including a graph, completely custom drawn using a canvas and of course JavaScript code. As you can see, the visual part of our site is going to be getting a lot of nice improvements in this module. Let's get started with audio and video. When you look at internet data usage today, you'll see that video data as well as audio data will take up the top spots. Daily millions and millions of video files are being watched on the web. I think we can't even start to imagine a world today without people doing crazy stuff and posting videos of this on the web. But how can we, as web developers, make sure that people can see these videos? Well, HTML5 now comes with support for audio and video, taking away a lot of sorrow for web developers. Previously, to play audio or video content, HTML did not offer a solution out of the box. We had to resort to other parties to be able to play audio and video content. Popular solutions included Silverlight, Flash, and quite a few others. And using these plugins, we were able to stream high-quality content to the connected clients. However, on both sides, there were some issues. First, on the developer side, the web developer had to work with yet another tool or framework, other than what they were using to build the web application itself. That can turn out to be an expensive task, since developers need to be trained and support has to be guaranteed when something goes wrong. On the receiving end, so on the client side, users had to install the correct version of the plugin and update them regularly if they wanted to be sure to be able to see all the content. Now with HTML5, we can now play back content without using plugins. HTML5 comes with support for both audio and video, and the browser is doing the rendering without the user having to install any additional things. You'll soon see that these tags are pretty simple, and using HTML itself only, we can only go so far. Therefore, a large part of the functionality is available again through a JavaScript API. We'll learn soon that the API is pretty capable. For example, we can even sync video with other content, such as subtitles. The support for audio and video in HTML5 comes from not one, but two elements which were added to the platform. These elements are pretty simple to understand. The audio tag has no visual representation, so there's no default media player skin. If you add an audio element to your page, you can control playback, but you won't see anything on screen. If you want to play back video, of course you'll use the video tag, which of course has a visual, namely a player window. Don't think of this again as a media player with controls and stuff by default. It is just a rectangle where you can play your video. On a side note, it's possible to play audio with the video element and video with the audio element. While this works, it's definitely not a recommended practice, as it would confuse developers coming onto the project after you. Of course, the audio and video tags have some properties we can use to have an influence over the playback. First and foremost, we need a way to indicate which content file we want to play. This we can do using the source attribute, src. The value can be an audio or a video file, as you can see here in the sample code. The autoplay property allows us to control whether or not the media file should start playback on load of the page or not. By default, this value is false, but we can control this behavior using the autoplay property. Here in the sample code, you can see that we are using autoplay equals autoplay, or simply add autoplay to control this property. By default, the media will only play once, but we can add the loop property on the audio as well as on the video tag. Another property available on both elements is the preload property. This property is used by the browser to check if it should already start downloading content while the playback hasn't started yet. So basically, this property controls the buffering type being used. None, of course, specifies that the content shouldn't start loading yet. Metadata indicates we want to get in metadata such as the length of the content, and auto means we'd like the browser to download the entire content file at page load already. As mentioned, the audio and video aren't player controls. The video element renders itself as a rectangle playing video. However, through the controls property, we can ask the browser to render player controls such as a play-pause button, a volume control and the like. Simply add the controls attribute and you'll see the controls appearing. The last common property between the audio and video element is the muted property. Quite logically, this attribute allows us to control if the media should be muted or not. You can see the attribute being used here in the sample code. The video element has a couple of properties which are not available on the audio element. For example, the width and the height properties. It's quite logical that these are not available for the audio element since that one has no visual representation. So by default, if we do not specify a value for the width and the height properties, the visual representation will be a rectangle with a width and height equal to those of the content itself. But what if we do not specify a video file at the loading of the page? Well, in that case, the default values will be used, and those are 300 by 150. If we specify only the width or the height, the video element will make sure that the aspect ratio is kept at all times. In the sample, we see that only the width here is set. This means that indeed the height will be set by the control automatically, so that the aspect ratio of the video is kept. Of course, we can break the aspect ratio by setting both the width and the height ourselves, although in most cases this is not recommended, of course. The video element also exposes the poster property. This can be used to point to an image file which is loaded in the video element while the content hasn't started playing yet. Here in the sample code, we can see that the poster attribute is pointing to a PNG file, which will be downloaded and shown while waiting to start the playback of the content. The audio and video tag are of course new, and older browsers won't be able to render them. If you want to handle this situation gracefully, you can add fallback content. This is the content you place between the open and close tags of the element, as you can see here for a video tag. If you'd browse to this code with IE6, you'd see the fallback content being rendered, since IE6 does not support the video tag. Up until here in this module, we've done the easy thing. We've defined one single source of content. In an ideal world, this would be enough. All browsers, although from different vendors, would support the same content types, and we would all be very happy. Sadly, we don't live in an ideal world, and browser vendors tend to like to do things differently from others. For media content, this is definitely the case, as different browsers support different media types. That is why it is dangerous to write your code with just one source and one media type, as it is very likely that some browsers won't have support for that particular type. How can we fix this? Instead of using the source, so the SRC attribute, we can use a couple of source elements inside the audio or video tag. Take a look at the sample code here, where we see that we have defined multiple source elements, each with an SRC value of a different file type. It's important to keep in mind that these sources are evaluated top to bottom. So as soon as the browser sees one it supports, it will pick that one. If we want, we can even be more specific, and instead of letting the browser guess the type by looking at the extension, we can specify the type ourselves, as you can see here in the last sample on this slide. The last question before we take a look at the JavaScript API for these controls is then, which formats are supported? As mentioned before, this depends definitely on the browser and can also change over time, so be sure to check this information online when you're watching this video for updated support in different browsers. Depending on the browser, there is support for MP4 or H.264, WebM and Auth0 when looking at video content. For audio content, again dependent on the browser, there's support for MP3, AAC and Ogg Vorbis. With attributes, we can control the playback only to a certain level. There will be a need to control these properties from the page we're on. So behind these controls, there's a JavaScript API available, which allows us to control most of these properties from code. For example, and quite logically, we can control the playback. Imagine that you want to build custom player controls, well then you'll need this. It turns out that we can easily control the playback using play and pause methods and the paused property. In the code you see here, we are first checking if the video is currently paused. If so, we start playing, and otherwise we can call the pause method and we'll pause the video. Also, the autoplay property can be set from code. Simply setting the autoplay to true or false from code changes this value. If we want to be notified about changes in the media playback, so that we, for example, can change a play button into a pause button, we can use the play and pause events. In the code you see here on the slide, you can see that upon pausing the content, we call code to hide the pause button and show the play button. And in the play event handler, we do the opposite. From JavaScript, we can also control how fast or slow the content should be playing. And for this, we have the playback rate property. If we set the value smaller than 1, it will play slower. If we set it higher than 1, it'll play faster. Another property we sometimes need is the current time property. And it can be used to either check where we currently are in the content, to update a text showing the current playtime. Or it can be used to set the content to a specific point in time, so seeking. There are two more interesting properties in this area. The first one is the duration property. Quite logically, the duration property is used to fetch the length of the content. This can be useful to show the progress of the playback. And related to progress is the progress event. The progress event fires automatically while playing, and it fires a couple of times per second. And in combination with the current time and duration properties, this can be used to create a working progress bar. In the code you see here on the slide, we see how the progress event is attached to a video element. Let's see how we can put this new knowledge to good use in the next demo, where we'll add a video to Joe's Coffee Store site. In this demo, we are going to add support for a video player inside the coffee details page. Notice that in the videos folder in the solution, I now have two videos named movie.mp4 and movie.ogg. Basically what I've done is I've created one video and I've converted it both to an mp4 and an .ogg file. This way the browser will get to choose whichever type it supports. Let's go to the coffee details page. I will add my video player, and of course I'll be using the new video tag. I've specified a width and a height. I've also specified the poster frame, which basically points to an image which will show when the video is still buffering, for example. And in this case, I've also specified that the video should start playing as soon as the page is ready and the video has been downloaded. So the autoplay is set to autoplay. There are other properties which I have skipped for now. Of course, this video tag doesn't know which movie it should be playing now. So instead of pointing this video tag to one source, I'm going to specify multiple sources. And I can do that by adding between the open and close video tag a couple of source elements. Notice that the first source element is pointing to the MP4 video and the second one is pointing to the OGG file. I also have fallback content. If the browser, for any reason, does not support the video tag, this text will be showing. Let's try running this. And here you see the video playing already. Now, if I remove the autoplay again, and we run it again, then we'll see that poster frame appearing. There we go. Now, at this point, the user doesn't have the ability to, for example, start playing the video. Now, we can use the controls property on the video element, but instead, I'm going to build my own little media player here using the JavaScript API. I'm going to start by adding a couple of buttons inside of this div. You'll see, for example, a slower button, a back button, a play button, a forward button, a faster button, and a mute button. Next, of course, I have to write some JavaScript, and I'm going to add a new JavaScript file again. And I'm going to call this videoplayer.js. There we go. Now in my JavaScript file, I'm going to create a new function called initialize video player controls. What I'm going to do here is attach functionality to the different buttons I've just added to my page. I'm going to start by searching for the actual video element by doing a document get element by ID, passing in video player, which was the ID of my video tag. Next, I'm going to create a function called play video. And in here, I'm going to check if the video is currently paused, so if the video element is not doing any playback. And if so, I'm going to start playing the content. I'm also going to change the content of the button to pause. And if the video is already playing, I'm going to pause it again. We're also going to make it possible to seek in the video. I want to jump forward a couple of seconds or jump backward a couple of seconds. So in here, I'm going to see if the video is currently at the starting position. And then I'm going to set it to the passed in number of seconds. Otherwise, I'm going to increase the current time of the video, so where it's currently playing, with the passed in number of seconds. Now, as mentioned, I need to attach functionality to my buttons. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to search for my play button and I'm going to attach an event listener on the click event. Then I'm going to call the play video function. And that was this one. I'm going to do something similar for the back button, which in this case is going to call the seek function passing in -5. So I'm going to jump back 5 seconds. And I'm going to do something very similar for all the other buttons. So we have the slower button, which is going to change the video playback rate. The faster button is going to increase the playback rate. And for the mute button, I'm going to check if the video is currently muted. And if so, I'm going to unmute it, and otherwise I'm going to mute it. So with this, I have my very basic player ready. Let us go back to the coffee details page and add the script to this file. Finally, like we've already done a couple of times, I need to call onto my script. Let's run this now again, and now we should have some basic media player functionality. So by default, the video doesn't start playing, and that's because I've removed that autoplay attribute. I can click my play button now, and the video starts playing again. I can pause it, play again. I can also rewind and also make it go a bit faster. I can also mute the video. So as you've seen, we've now implemented basic video player capability in my page. Let's go back to the slides.